Today, we're going to be learning how to shade the first shape on your shaded layer drawing. Once your thumbnail sketch has been approved, you can begin sketching out your favorite and most successful composition sketch. Map it out the same way you made your thumbnail sketch. So for me, I drew the 3 lines in the same spots with the organic shapes drawn in between all of the angled lines. Make sure that the space between the shapes is very small, and you should only have between 3 to 7 shapes for this first layer. You're going to be doing this on your final shaded layer paper that is 6 by 8 inches wide. And draw everything out with your 2H pencil so you're making really nice light marks. Next, erase the lines in between the shapes with your white Staedtler eraser. We do this first before we shade because that Staedtler eraser leaves all of those little tidbits behind, and we want to do it before we shade so we can wipe it off with our hand and not end up smearing over our shaded parts. And if any of your lines get erased, just go quickly back in with a 2H pencil to put them back in. For this project, you can actually choose to shade your drawing with any of the 3 shading techniques we've learned. So scumbling, cross-hatching, or hatching. I chose to use hatching. When you begin, use your 2H pencil, make sure it's nice and sharp. And then with a light layer, I would like you to press as light as possible because we're going to be building up our values from light to dark. So for this first layer, you're going to be shading in as light as you can, making your marks nice and close to one another, and you're only putting in the light grays. Shade this light gray around your entire first shape. The shading should extend inward about 1/2 inch. For your second layer, you're still using your 2H pencil, and you're only going to shade slightly darker than the previous layer because we're trying to create this transition of value where it's darkest along the edge and getting lighter as we come in towards the center of our object. We're trying to capture a gradation of values, meaning we want to see a smooth transition of values. So as you're shading around the edge, you are going to press slightly harder along the edge, but not too much harder that it's going to create a much darker gray. We only want like a shade or 2 darker than our previous layer. And then as you're shading in towards the center of that shape, I want you to lift up the pressure of your pencil to where you're getting that gradation of values, where it's slowly kind of fading away. Now I'm going to be putting in my third layer, still with my 2H pencil. Notice I'm only pressing a little bit harder to make a slightly darker mark than the previous gray layer that I have underneath. I'm not going much darker, and because I'm gradually building up to my darkest values, I'm able to get a really nice smooth transition. Remember that whenever you're shading with hatching or cross-hatching or scumbling, you want to make sure you're lifting up the pencil after each mark and that you're keeping your marks close to one another. When you keep your marks close to one another so you don't have a lot of gaps, it makes the shading look a lot more solid and not so much as a sketchier type of shading. For the fourth layer, I'm going to move on and use my HB pencil. Remember, every pencil has a different proportion of clay and graphite in the lead. Our 2H pencil has more clay than graphite, which is why it makes a lighter mark. Our HB pencil has an equal proportion of clay and graphite. So because we have more graphite than the 2H, the pencil's automatically going to be making a darker mark, which is why we like to use it whenever we're starting to put in our middle to dark grays within any drawing that we're doing. So as I'm putting in this HB pencil, I'm still only pressing a little bit harder than my previous layers. I'm not making the gray jump to a really, really dark gray because I want to make sure I have that nice gradation of values, that good smooth transition. But because this HB pencil is a lot darker, I'm not shading in all the way like I did with my 2H pencil. I'm only shading in about halfway of the length of my shading marks because those lighter values that I achieved with the 2H pencil, it's going to be really hard to keep them that light with the HB if I would shade over them. So that's why we don't want to shade over our light values. We're only starting to build up our dark to middle grays with this HB pencil. So now I'm putting in my fifth layer. For this fifth layer, once again, I'm only pressing a little bit darker than the previous one, still using my HB pencil. And as I shade in, I'm still not shading in all of the way. With every consecutive layer now, I'm keeping my pencil further back, so I'm starting to show that full range of values, that full value scale that we had developed last week. For this sixth layer, I can't go any darker with my HB, which is why I moved up to my 2B pencil. For this one, I'm only putting in my darkest blacks and I'm pressing as hard as I can to really increase the range of my values. Because when you use a full range of values whenever you're shading, it makes your objects look more three-dimensional. For today, I only want you to shade one object on your drawing. And the one thing I want to make sure you guys do not do is do not take your finger and smudge it across your shading to try to get that smooth transition. Try to do it all with your pencils. So for this final work, the shading should go in about 1/2 inch. There should be a full range of values where you've developed them gradually, starting with your 2H, then your HB, finishing with the 2B pencil. And if you would ever make a mistake, use your kneaded eraser, mold it to a point so it mimics that of a pencil, and then go in, erasing away any areas where you might not have smooth transitions. And when you erase away, use the same shading technique motion that you use. So I'm erasing away with hatching marks, and that helps lighten up any errors that I have in my work. So after you finish shading your one object, take a picture of your work and submit it into today's assignment. Good luck!